Hi, my name is Keith Aleo, and I am here with Jake Nissly of the San Francisco Symphony. I want to welcome everyone. I am absolutely thrilled and excited to be with Jake. Jake and I have known each other for a very, very long time, and it's just really exciting to see all the great things he's doing and the new sticks that he has. So, welcome. And let's bring Jake up here and say hi. There he is, my man.
How's it going?
Bravo, bravo.
Hey, thanks for having me here, Keith. I really appreciate it. Thanks to Vic Firth for having me here. Really great.
Absolutely. It's wonderful to have you. And here we are doing the interview via online. How you hanging in there? How you doing?
Doing okay. It's a beautiful day here in San Francisco. Finding a lot of time to do some extra practicing during these days. I've been actually quite inspired by some of the free time I've had here to really dig into some stuff I haven't looked at in years, or some pieces that my students are playing, or just really, having some really thorough practice sessions. It's actually trying to make lemonade out of lemons here.
Yeah. I mean, during these COVID times, we find ourselves in isolation, and it's interesting because my students said, I'm just so bored," and there you say, actually, I'm really inspired. Wow, that's fantastic. And so you do a daily practice routine, I would imagine, and how are you structuring that?
Yeah, well, for at least 10 years now, I've had sort of the same snare drum warm-up routine that I've kind of done the same way every single day. It involves stick control on a practice pad, a variety of calisthenic exercises from the Mitch Peters Intermediate Snare Drum Studies from the front of that book. Then I do all of those exercises in reverse, meaning in reverse tempo. So I go from slow to fast, and then I start fast and do them all pianissimo and do the same sequence back to where I started. So that in and of itself takes about 40 minutes. And then on top of that, I have a pretty strict routine of practicing soft snare drum. I use a lot of Pratt and Wilcoxon rudimental solos. And again, one of the nice byproducts of this time is I've been able to really codify my mallet routine and sort of go through some of the books that I really haven't cracked since graduate school and picking out certain exercises. So just, trying to, create inspiration for myself by knowing that there's infinite amounts of repertoire and materials out there that, I'm getting a chance to finally read some of it and go through some of it. So.
Yeah, and I just love to hear that, and I hope the students out there listening find inspiration in that, because it is challenging. It is a hard time, but it, in every challenge, I keep saying every challenge there's a gift, and the gift is that you have time to do these things. So cool. So we're gonna crank up a video of you doing some stone that we recorded not too long ago, and just check it out. It's what is it, Jake? It's just the first page of stone.
This is stick control. Yeah, the first 24.
Yep.
I know he says to do it 20 times. I don't quite do it 20 times, but I am pretty strict about two things. One, students ask me this a lot. Can I practice this along with music? And I mean, of course you can, but I tend to be pretty holistic about stick control in that I only use a metronome. I use it, what you'll hear here is the metronome at half note equals 50, I believe. So starting really super slow. And the reason I don't like using music, I used to as a student myself, is because I put a huge emphasis on all 24 of these exercises being as even as possible, even though we all know different stickings can elicit sort of different phrasings, different emphases. But the idea for me is for the beginning, if I can do all 24, then I know that that's the ultimate benchmark, the ultimate jumping off point to be able to play anything I want.
So it's about movement and strength and so on, but it's also about hearing yourself. And I think a lot of times we think of stick control as about technique and movement, but actually, you're talking about sound, which is nice. So let's hear this thing.
You can hear the metronome's already going here in the background at 50 beats a minute. This will be how I will start every single practice day with George Stone's stick control. So here I'll show you a little bit of stick control with the Jake Nissly signature stick.
Bravo. I know it's just stick control, but being a percussion nerd, just to see the fluidity and the movement, it's just very gratifying. Just very nice to see that just fluidity and relaxation. It's awesome. So we do stick control. And a lot of, I think a lot of my students and students out there, are developing their practice routine. And I just want to get a little more specifics. You mentioned starting slow and then speeding up and bringing it back down. And do you just play stick control with that? Or if you could just give me a little more specifics, like.
Sure. Yeah, I have a pretty detailed outline of this that I give to most of my students and for most classes I give, but to just sort of do it verbally quickly, I start with stick control, the first page. Sometimes, I will say during the quarantine, I've been doing the first 48, which is quite the haul. And I do it for twice as many iterations as you heard on that video there. That was just for the website to show what I do through this. But yeah, I do stick control at half note equals 50, and then I do it at half note equals 60, and then I do it at half note equals 75. And then sometimes I'll do it at half note equals 90. That's starting to get up there pretty ambitious with some of the 4 on the hand. And then I use some of the Mitch Peters exercises. I think there's a few of these videos we might check out later of 3 camps and some of the other Roman numerals that I do at half note equals 75, half note equals 90. I do every exercise, both right hand lead, left hand lead after stick control. It's sort of, to me, symmetry, whether it be visually what you're seeing, what we're playing, which is part of what stick control is for also. I mean, I'm always using a mirror when I practice stick control to be able to see that pure symmetry as much as possible. Right. Every human body is different. Sorry.
Yeah. So you're going with both. You're looking at yourself in the mirror to see stick heights and movement and so on, and then you're also using the sound. So you're really doing both. And the Mitchell Peters, that's the intermediate etudes, right?
That's correct. Yeah, there's a series of Roman numerals. I think it goes up to 10 or 11, something like that at the beginning. I use number 1, 3, 4, and 5. And I do them all right hand lead, left hand lead, like I was saying. Yeah, they're kind of, like you said, they really are a warm up. I mean, that's why I go from slow to fast. It's like stretching before a run or lifting weights. You build up to it, but it's also, yes, of course you're building technique and speed, but we're also trying to get, a lot of these exercises are sort of designed under the surface at tempos that correlate exactly to a lot of orchestral repertoire. Because I'm a big believer, I don't really like to practice the excerpts that much if we're talking about orchestral percussion, orchestral auditions, for instance. I've always found it much more beneficial to practice the basics, the fundamentals. To some of my best teachers said, be good at the snare drum, not good at Lieutenant Kiji. And I 100% believe in that. And I think that this is a way to do that where, again, I literally do this every single day in a way that's so regimented, such a routine that, it really came to be when I was taking orchestral auditions. It was the kind of thing where whether I'm in a Best Western or I'm at a bus station or an airport or in a warm-up room with 30 other candidates, this is a warm-up that I can do every single day as long as I have a pad and a pair of sticks and some earbuds for my metronome. You know, it's a very centering thing too. So I mean, still staying on stick control here. One last aspect of it is what you said. I'm watching, I'm making sure I'm symmetrical, I'm listening, making sure I'm even, and I'm stretching myself out. And it's three things at once. It keeps you super engaged. I have a lot of students who say, oh, stick control is a little boring or it gets a little monotonous. And I would just counter that I don't believe you're doing it correctly, unless I hear them do it perfectly, which, as you heard on video, I still struggle with sometimes. So it's the kind of thing where, yes, you have this, daily repetitive exercise, but at least for me, I'm coming back to it with the same sort of vigor and excitement every single day because it is the essence of what we do.
Yeah, it's the foundation of what we do, and I something that you hinted at is almost meditative, like where you're repeating the same thing, and it's almost like you get into this groove, and maybe 40 minutes goes by, like that. So the Peters, stick control Peters, and then you said a couple other things. You said you do Pratt. Tell me about the Pratt. Which one is that?
So John Pratt has a number of, I guess you'd call them rudimental snare drum solos that are out there. The most famous one is the 14 modern contest solos.
Right.
Mr. Pratt just recently passed away also. So we did a little tribute to him at the San Francisco Conservatory where I'm a teacher. And for those of you interested, there are many videos out there of the Hellcats playing this, just unbelievably great videos of this music being performed. But kind of what I did is I took a slight twist on this, and I don't think it was necessarily my original idea, but it's definitely something that I push for all my students. I used both books, the Pratt, the 14, well, he has more than two books, but two of his books. There's one called the 14 Modern Contest Solos, one called the New Pratt Book. And between those two, it takes about 45 minutes to an hour to do them all, but I do them all on my snare drum at pianissimo, as quiet as I can possibly play, pushing myself all the time, and still keeping that same style. So it's not just quiet, but it's quiet with an attitude. It's quiet with a purpose. We talk about that all the time when we talk about orchestral repertoire. So I'm trying to once again do that work through this medium and not get so caught up in playing a 4-stroke rough on a specific piece. I feel like if you put the work in this way, because just being honest, the way I equate it, playing 2 books full of Pratt is much, much harder than playing a 7-stroke roll at pianissimo.
That's right. You're referring to Scheherazade, but yes. If you could play those 2 Pratt books, you for sure will be able to play that.
And that's just as much for your head, I think, as it is for your hands. It's the sort of, if you lift 100 pounds every day and your final exam is to lift a 25-pound weight, you should probably be pretty confident going into that. And that's more what I'm teaching my students about your brain, is not just, okay, I got this because I've done it a million times. It's more so I absolutely have this because I've heard myself do it over and over and over again. And the worst case scenario is there might be a little bit of a flub, but if you go into it, even that alone, it will be so obvious that you have all of your T's crossed and your I's dotted, all the details taken care of. Yeah,
it's almost like the foundation. If you have an amazing foundation, building something on top of that foundation, an orchestral excerpt, a solo or something, is not as big a deal as to try and start from the top. Yeah, I understand totally. So we have Drum Corps on Parade, you playing it. We recorded this recently too. So this is just on a pad, and this is full volume. So let's check out Pratt Drum Corps on Parade.
I'm going to show you some of the exercises I do on a daily basis involving the metronome. But here you'll hear the metronome is beating at a very slow pace. In this instance, 31 beats a minute. So what I like to do with this is I like to apply it to some of our more famous rudimental solos from Charlie Wilcoxon, John Pratt, Joe Tompkins. Here, I'll show you a little bit of Drum Corps on Parade.
Okay. Okay. I might be going into something else other than percussion after hearing that. I mean, it's just the fluidity, the familiarity you have with it, because you're saying, Keith, I do this every single day. This is like what you do. So it's like walking. Somebody walks in a very calm, manner. It doesn't seem difficult. That's just beautiful. Also, you had the metronome. You had it at 50? Is that right?
That's 31 beats a minute. So that's
30.
The quarter note equals 124. If that's about where I play that. So the reason for that is because I don't normally play that loud, although it's fun to hear it loud on a pad. Is because that tempo, 124 cut in half is 62, which is sort of my tempo for Scheherazade, for Lieutenant Kiji, for Delecluse 9, which you'll hear at the end here. And cut in half from that is how I practice all those excerpts, which is the whole note equals 31 of Kiji. The dotted half note equals 31 in Scheherazade. Is that right? Yeah. Same thing with Delecluse. Basically, and my students all hear this all the time. I always use the metronome when I practice, except for Bach and marimba solos like that. But I always use it very sparingly. I like to think of it as someone who's learning to ride their bicycle, and if I have the metronome on whatever, that's great. I mean, that's super precise and subdivided, but I feel like when it's time to go and ride your bike, those training wheels won't be there and you're going to fall over. So I'd rather physically internalize that time. Obviously you're intellectualizing it a little bit too by just sort of some people have perfect pitch. I think I'm one of those people. You can put the metronome on, and don't test me on this, but I can probably tell you exactly what the BPM is. I think a lot of percussionists are probably that way. I don't feel like I'm alone in that regard, but it's the kind of thing where we, as percussionists, most of the time when we play alone and not in an ensemble, we are expected to convey metronomic time. We are expected in a snare drum etude to not really show a ton of rubato. I mean, that Pratt you just heard would sound very strange with retards and accelerandos randomly placed in there. I mean, it should have that same street groove to it the whole time. So, I mean, I use this for other instruments too. Just when I'm practicing repertoire, when I'm practicing trying to get something really in time, I will, and it's hard. Obviously, the less information you have, the more you have to do for yourself. So again, going back to stick control here, this stuff I build it all from the bottom to permeate everything I do. So when you get to this much more challenging stuff, it's a lot easier. The learning curve is not so steep. It's not so daunting, I'd say. Yeah.
I mean, what the thing you're saying with the metronome is just spot on, because what you're doing is when you have the metronome clicking constantly, it sort of becomes a crutch. And correct me if I'm not interpreting your words here. The metronome is sort of the answers to the quiz. If you want to know where the beat is, here's where the beat is. Where when you take less clicks, you have to feel the internal time internally by yourself between those clicks. And that is just awesome to play that. And any students out that are listening, I just think that is a wonderful challenge to play the Pratt, at 31. There you go. Or whatever, where it's clicking every 4 beats. So you're developing more space between the clicks. And then we were talked about Pratt, and you mentioned Tompkins. Tell me about the Tompkins. How do you use that? Do you just play the solos, or is there anything particular special you do with them? Or
well, what's cool about the Tompkins is, I mean, that's some of the hippest new stuff that's been out there for 10 or 15 years now. I think first came out, it was about the end of my days as a student. But how I use that with all my undergraduate and graduate students. You're starting to see it show up more and more as repertoire on even orchestral auditions. The way I do it myself, and this could start a whole other conversation, is I originally was a drum set player. That's kind of my background from growing up in Iowa. I played a ton of drum set. So I always play even the Pratt at the drum set. Not always, but a lot of times, when I'm in my studio at Davies Hall, the Symphony, I play with a kick drum in there, so you can really feel, the other aspect of internalizing. Like, I also mark drum corps is motion. So I feel like you can't see my legs. I feel like moving all four limbs, or the way that you mark time when you're playing drumline exercises, that also really helps internalize the time. So with the Tompkins stuff, considerably more rhythmically challenging than the Pratt. I think that's even more the reason to try and see if you can put that kick drum right. Stuff that's a little more than. So, I mean, that to me, what that is, I think he even says what it is. It's a hybrid between the lineage of Wilcoxon and Pratt, mixed with Guy Lafave, a very famous author, drummer, French, from the French school. You sort of see those two fused together, and Joe has really made some incredible. I understand there's a new book out too. Just incredible literature for percussion, especially snare drum.
Yeah, that's great. So this is a wealth of knowledge, and like I keep saying, the students out there that are hearing this, use this as inspiration. When you have time off. So Jake, tell me a little bit about San Francisco Symphony, working with Michael Tilson Thomas, the hall. How does all, you have, as a percussionist, we have so many factors that influence what choices we make, whether it's a cymbal crash or a bass drum note or whatever, what xylophone mallets, Tell me a little bit about that experience with the San Francisco Symphony, the hall, and Michael Tilson Thomas.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would start by saying it's, MTT, Michael Tilson Thomas. This would have been the end of his 25th year and his final year in the San Francisco Symphony. So we're all very sad that we're not having the opportunity this June to send him off in the way that he deserves. From what I understand, I think there'll be efforts made to have him come back and do some of these programs with us. But MTT, in my opinion, and I'm biased, he's been my boss here for 7 years. I also worked with him in the New World Symphony for 2 years. He's been more than anything, a mentor and a friend, but also an inspiration for me as a percussionist. I think of, all the conductors I've worked with, I'm not sure if anyone knows percussion as well as him, except maybe our new music director, Esa-Pekka Salonen. And so I feel like I'm in an incredibly fortunate situation to be here in San Francisco, not only with a great section, but an orchestra that takes risks, an orchestra that plays a lot of contemporary music, which translates to a lot of work for percussionists. MTT also, he worked with James Brown. He's worked with, more than just the straight and narrow classical field. I mean, he knows what's up. And what's been cool working with him is we play some of his compositions, and we've been able to sort of talk through orchestration, or what instrument should be used, or how, what kind of sticking works. I mean, he's the kind of guy, he really knows what he's talking about. And I think we as percussionists know a lot of times conductors, the most common thing they say to us is this. just be quiet.
Yeah.
And with Michael, harder sticks, wood mallets. And with Michael, it's so much more collaborative. We have such thoughtful conversations with one another. And just a week ago, we're doing a little Zoom project for his retirement, and he asked me a number of questions about, should this be on xylophone, should this be on marimba, what kind of mallet should you use, do you use rubber, do you use hard cord? Not many conductors have that vocabulary to start with. And so working with him in this orchestra, I mean, I had the opportunity to premiere a concerto by Adam Schoenberg last year. Not too common to commission percussion concertos, but MTT was behind that. It's never a dull week here. I mean, I think in this last season that was cut short, I played the Mahler Hammer and Mahler 6. I played percussion concerto. I played with Metallica in the San Francisco Symphony. Got to hang out with Lars Ulrich. It's a good picture of us out there, me showing him how to play the triangle. Just really opportunities I wouldn't have had elsewhere, for sure. And I'm so thankful to be a part of this organization. In terms of what you're asking, sound in the hall, he has his own specific ideas about certain things when it comes particularly to keyboard instruments and their mallets, the mallet selection. Again, like I said, he has a more advanced vocabulary than most conductors. As it relates to drums in general, he's a fan of really dry, maybe let's say smaller sounds. So I tend to use smaller snare drums, not the little pancake drums they're calling them these days, but definitely, I get by using a 4x14 brass snare drum a lot of the time. And part of all of this, to lead back to what we're talking about here, was why it was so great to develop a stick like this that is so versatile. Because I run from playing the drum set some weeks to playing multi-percussion setups, to playing bolero, to playing Scheherazade. And I can use these sticks. I used them for my concerto. I used them for, virtually everything I do because of the versatility, and because this orchestra I play in requires an immense amount of versatility because, like I said, one week it could be a Haydn symphony and purely classical, and the next week it can be Barrio and MTT and some off the wall stuff. And, I felt like my stick bag was getting too crowded with too many different pairs of snare drum sticks that easier to simplify. And thanks to Vic Firth, I have the correct implement now.
That's great. There's nothing like working for a conductor that you not only admire, but respect. And the hall, how is the hall? Is it difficult place, or
Davies is it doesn't fall into one of those blanket halls. My previous orchestra, I was the principal in Cleveland for a few years, which is an amazing hall. Severance Hall is one of the finest halls for making music on earth, and that hall is notorious for being quite resonant, meaning percussion can get away with playing at unheard of soft levels, which I think is great. I think it's an aspect of percussion playing that doesn't get enough attention. In San Francisco, I think, the sound of the orchestra is different because the sound of Davies is different. It's a little brighter of a sounding orchestra. Definitely, a little more volume coming from this orchestra. And so therefore, I've got to be able to project. And again, this stick here, even if I'm playing a Shostakovich symphony, I would use it for bolero. I would use it for basically everything except maybe a big field drum part or something. I might look for one of Vic's bigger sticks, but
you said something key, which is the effect of the hall on your sound, the effect of the conductor on your sound and your choices. And I think that's something we oftentimes forget. We make choices, but the choices are not about where we're standing. They're about where the conductor is and the listener, ultimately the listener in the hall. And because that's our final product. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about. So that's great. So listen, we have you playing one of Peter's exercise as it relates to Scheherazade. So this is that what you were talking about, that transference of moving from stick control or Peters or any type of exercises or etudes, and how it relates to an excerpt. So let's check this out.
This exercise comes from Mitchell Peters' Intermediate Snare Drum Studies. There's a series of Roman numeral exercises at the front of the book, and Roman numeral number 1 is the one I'm going to focus on here today. And I use this as a sort of direct application to Rimsky-Korsakov's Scheherazade in the 4th movement, where you have, mimicking the trumpet line, so that exercise goes like this. I think I've played enough of it for you to see the similarities to the way that the snare drum part goes at letter P in Scheherazade to this exercise. Here, I will demonstrate a little bit of letter P in Scheherazade.
And there we go with that same slow metronome. You know, I'm listening to it, I'm going, oh, that's awesome. You cannot rush at all. And the tendency is to rush, you know, in that spot. And yeah, so you see that the connection of excerpts. And that's just one of many, many examples, I'm sure. And so maybe the people out there listening now are going to come to San Francisco Conservatory to learn more about that.
Please do.
All right. So we were talking about the stick. I have the stick here. And so tell me a little bit about it. When I first saw it, I had not seen anything like it before. You know, there's a taper at the end, the bead. And like you said, it's fantastic because you use it for everything. You'll use it for a contemporary piece. You'll use it for bolero. You'll use it, you know, multi-percussion contemporary piece. You'll use it for anything. Can you tell me a little bit about the stick?
Yeah, sure. I mean, when I was approached a few years ago about this, I was admittedly a little skeptical because I think there's a lot of really good stuff out there. But as I mentioned earlier, I felt like I was switching in my bag, you know, use this for this, use this for that. And it just, you know, it seemed unnecessary with snare drum sticks to me. And so I sort of fused together a lot of the sticks that I've liked. You know, I mean, the original taper on this comes from, well, it comes from the Echo Vic Firth stick, but maybe even something from Regal Tip a long, long time ago. Either way, I'd seen it around. There's some other, you know, mass-produced sticks that use the taper as well that I really like.
I had never seen that, Jake. I was in the dark about that.
Well, I like it just for the feel, the weight distribution, but more so, to me, important was the tip here, and that a lot of it comes from, it's a combination of just things I liked when I was younger, which, again, I mentioned that I marched drum corps. You know, when I was designing this, I sort of made a reference to how much I used to still do like the Ralph Hardiman Core Master sticks that Vic Firth makes. I used those in my drum corps years and high school and college marching band. So this bead sort of to me, represents a little bit of that. It also represents the original red Dave Weckl drumstick that I used to love when I was a young kid. So both Vic Firth sticks that I still use to this day. And lastly, I think a lot of, you know, the General, which is one of my favorite sticks, the SD1. I love it. The only thing for me is that I felt like it's a little unforgiving with the spherical ball. And I felt like with this, I could sort of control a little more. There's a little more surface area. It's a little more like a barrel. There's a little surface area for consistent playing. And then if I really wanted to move my angle down and play on the very tip, I could do that and change it more so than with the sphere, because the sphere is, you know, it's a sphere. So it's equal distribution.
Wow. Awesome.
And in terms of the weight, you know, I think I've had a few different pairs of these. They all are kind of within the same range. I just think it's nice to have a good feeling stick in the hand. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I mean, if Charlie Parker played with a plastic saxophone through all his years, I mean, I think people need to use what they feel most comfortable with. But I guess I'm of the mindset that you don't need a stick bag full of 20 different pairs of sticks, you know, at least not for concert snare drum. You know, my drum set friends might definitely disagree with me, and I would maybe join them in that. But, you know, for what we do, for what I do in my job, for sure, it's very rare that I would need like a gigantic stick, or that I would need, you know, a teeny tiny bead stick or anything like that. So, yeah.
So tell me, you know, sticks are about sound, and sticks are or this is a question. Is it about the sound? Is it about the feel? Is it about both? Is it about something else? I mean, because I have to say, when I picked this up for the first time, I was like, man, that feels good. And I felt really comfortable. I hadn't had an experience like that before. And so, you know, that would be, you know, my first question. Is it the feel, or is it the sound, or what was, you know, what?
Yes. Yes. No, I'd say 75 for me, 75% the feel. You know, I did a lot of recording when I was at New World, especially of all the different sticks I had from, we'd set the recorder 100 feet away or whatever out in the audience and then play. And the only real negligible difference I could find was in sticks that were super dense and maybe of a heavier wood. The sound would come across a little bit darker and somehow less articulate. And I think the idea with snare drum in my, just in general, we try to aim towards the articulate side of things. And so I sort of eliminated a number of sticks based on that for sound, or at least a number of woods, I would say, that I wouldn't use based on sound. But after that, it's really a feel, and when I was doing my sort of, research for this stick, I went through every stick I've ever owned and played and sort of jotted down. True story, about 3 summers ago, I would do my snare drum routine, but I would have a randomly selected pair of sticks for myself every day, and I wouldn't look at it till I was done. I wouldn't look at them till I was done. I would play it all the way through and sort of jot my thoughts down and then see what the sticks were. So I did this for about 40 days straight, not kidding you. And kind of, I started seeing, it was like the NCAA tournament, March Madness of sticks. This one, okay, that's eliminated. This one. And I sort of got the traits that I really liked down and relayed that to the people at Vic, and they did even better than I could have imagined. So.
That's a great story. I've never done that because I always look to see what it is, but it would be very interesting to just grab sticks and just see what they feel and sound like. It's wonderful.
I will admit I forgot a couple times, and I just sort of.
Never
mind.
So, Jake and I, you and I have had a long history. I knew you when I think you were a student at Juilliard, right? Is that
Mm-hmm.
And
first met.
I followed you, your career through when you went to New World Symphony, and then you went on to Detroit and Cleveland and now San Francisco. Most people, I always say this, win one audition. I've won one orchestral audition, but you've won 3, 4, maybe. It's a lot. That's a lot. It's a lot of auditions to win.
I don't take it for granted. That's for sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, can just, before we finish up, just some tips that you might have, like how did that happen? It is, I mean, in the orchestral world, come on, it is a bit unusual to have that much success. And I've known you since you were a student and just saw that progression. Like, well, what is it? Is it what we're talking about, or just it's landing that foundation, or what is it?
I think you're going to get a different answer from everyone. I mean, Matt Howard, who's principal in LA, is one of my best friends, and we've talked about this a bunch. And we, I think people use different verbiage to talk about the same ideas of having a technique, of having, you mentioned meditative. I don't, whatever word you want to use, some sort of way of getting your mind in the game, because I think there are so many guys and girls out there that can play so well, but it's a matter of being able to do it when it counts, being able to do it. And the way I look at it is being on every day. And so the audition is not anything more than just another day. I consider myself extraordinarily fortunate, and I don't feel like that was a result of me just being so much better than everyone, because I fully recognize how many amazing percussionists there are out there that haven't won the orchestra job, or my colleagues in all these other orchestras that are just fantastic players. I think if you talk to a lot of them, it's how you figure out what works for you here. And for me, it was a routine, a regimen, getting something, I mean, my audition in Detroit was completely blind. My audition in Cleveland was, blind and then without a screen. My audition in San Francisco was me playing in the actual orchestra and then playing an audition recital by myself. So 3 completely different structures that translated all the same, in a way where I felt like I was confident in what I was presenting to these committees. I felt like what I had to say was compelling, and I judged myself in terms of success in being able to play the way I wanted to play and trying my absolute best to take myself out of the win-lose. Is this fair? Did they judge me correctly or not? Because at the end of the day, you aren't the judge. And so I think, the more that you can put yourself into a situation where you deem success, and this is talking for here.
Yeah.
Your success is I played as well or close to as well as I possibly can, and you leave that in the hands of the judges. You leave that to whomever is in charge of making that decision. And so when I was younger, I mean, I think I'm not alone in this. I'm a very competitive person. And when I was younger, I played a lot of sports, and I viewed the audition game when I first got into it very much like sports, like me against everyone. And while my competitive level, if anything, went up over the years, I quit thinking of it, Matt and I talk about this, more like golf, or the way I think, this will date me a little bit. I used to think about it like the game Mario Kart, where you set your fastest record and then you constantly race yourself and you see a little ghost of yourself. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to beat myself. I'm not trying to beat someone else. I couldn't care less who has been invited to the audition or who's coming or whatever. It's finding a way that you're true to yourself. You find a way that, you practice every day in a way that obviously makes you better, but makes you stronger in your head too. And I mean, bringing this full circle, Keith, when you have a tool like this, when you have a pair of sticks, it's like your lucky batting gloves in baseball or your lucky socks or something like that. You pick up that pair of sticks, and believe me, I use the same pair every time. I have tons of pairs of these sitting right over here, but I use this pair. You just sort of, you develop a rapport with that. You have this routine. You have this sort of, no matter what, no matter if your audition's running 2 hours late, or you got an offender bender, or the person that you really don't like is talking your ear off, you can drown all that out and sort of center around, I got my stick control, I got my sticks, I got my mallets, I got everything. And you go and you do your best. And, I have some of my friends won their auditions when they were super young. I didn't take a ton of auditions, but I certainly didn't win my first 5 or 6 or 7 along the way. I mean, there were, some setbacks. And I think that also helps you learn what not to do and lets you get a real taste of what this music business is about. Because at least for me, and I don't think for hardly any of my colleagues, it wasn't just like you graduate school and you waltz into the New World Symphony and then into principal of 3 orchestras. There's a lot of work that happens along the way. And, Keith mentioned, I met Keith when I was in my second year of grad school, and Keith, really helped me prepare for auditions along the way. And we remained friends ever since. And, I appreciate that greatly.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot in what you just said, particularly about golfing and competing against yourself and not those around you. Your lucky set of sticks, it's what and no matter what's happening, you're staying focused on that, your stick control or whatever you're doing, and becoming sort of zen-like about your musicianship. And I am going to be a musician. I'm not competing with anybody. I'm competing against myself, which is really incredible. And, staying in touch, and it's been wonderful to stay in touch. And you and I chatted about this project early on, like, do you want to do it? I remember the first thing you said was, there's so many sticks out there. And I said, yeah, well, you never know. And then you said, what if we had a stick that, I could use for everything? And so there we are. So really wonderful. I particularly really enjoyed what you just said. Thank you for that. I hope everybody out there takes something from that like I just did. So we have one more thing. It's a little bit of Delecluse 9. Is that right?
Yeah, this will be the first few lines of Delecluse 9.
Yep.
I hope you enjoy it. And I just want to say thank you to everyone out there for letting me have this opportunity. Thank you to Vic Firth. Thank you, Keith. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, everyone involved with this. Hope everyone stays engaged, stays safe, stays healthy. A lot going on in the world right now. It's nice to have an escape. Music it's a blessing to spend the hours of my day working on this stuff.
Yeah, that's very true. So we'll have a little bit of Delecluse 9, and thanks everyone for listening. It's been really, I Hope everybody enjoys it as much as I am. So,
Thank you.
Delecluse 9.